Tesla stock is up 0.5% today. This is what Elon Musk just said. He responded to a post from Dave Lee and said, quote, "The super strong support from retail and large investors meant a lot to me. I will do my utmost to ensure that their faith is rewarded." And let's be honest, Tesla stock has not done much of anything in the past couple of years, but I wouldn't want to bet against Elon or Tesla here. But short sellers are doing just that, with Tesla's short interest of free float sitting at multi-year highs of 3.66%, $18.44 billion currently sold short in the stock, totaling about 101.57 million shares. Here today, you actually have a net covering, at least so far, 1.54 million shares that have been returned or covered, bought back, and you do have borrowed shares of 434,000. That means on net, over 1.1 million shares have been covered today, likely helping to fuel this upside move in Tesla. But before we go any further, you need to see this. This was posted on X by Carl over on CNBC. This guy, you've definitely seen him before if you've watched any CNBC. It says, hedges the Fed to cut rates to as low as 2.25% by the first quarter of next year. This was on the Bloomberg terminal today. It says premium paid up to approximately $9 million on a dovish SOFR options play in March of 2025. Options which hedges the Fed to cut rates to as low as 2.25% by the first quarter of next year. It says options expire March 14th with open interest in the strikes of 46,719 and 31,129 as of Thursday's close suggests the flow set new risk. Fed dated OIS currently prices a rate of approximately 4.58% for the March policy meeting next year, implying around 75 basis points of rate cuts versus the Fed's effective. The maximum profit in the option structure targets a rate of approximately 2.25%, implying the Fed to cut rates by about 300 basis points between now and the March policy meeting. That is a pretty bearish bet. About as bearish as you're going to see for $9 million. If the Fed cuts rates anything close to 300 basis points, the economy is going to be in the poop chute. To make matters worse, the bid to ask spread in the SPY is as if the VIX was over 30. Now, what this means is there is a lot more puts being bought on the S&P 500 than what you would typically expect to see as markets are sitting at all-time highs. But we will have more on all of this and what you need to know about stocks going ahead over the next couple of months in the next video. So stay tuned to the channel for that. It will be coming out at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. And trust me, you do not want to miss it. Elon Musk wrote on X, "We are nothing without our fans." This is obviously a double meaning considering retail investors are fans to Elon, but it's specifically in regards to this giant GPU cooler that is being built in Texas with these massive fans. Elon also gives us a little bit more color on this. He says sizing for 130 megawatts of power and cooling this year, but will increase to 500 megawatts over the next 18 months or so, aiming for about half of Tesla's AI hardware and half NVIDIA/other. Play to win or don't play at all. And Tesla is definitely not playing around. They are playing to win in this AI race, specifically in regards to robotics and full self-driving. BMW said today they have canceled a $2.15 billion order for battery cells for their electric vehicles with Northvolt. It was reported that the Swedish company could not deliver on time on a long-term supply contract for battery cells signed in 2020. Bugatti today unveiled their first all-new car since 2016 and the Chiron's successor called the Tourbillon. The price is $4.6 million. It is the first hybrid Bugatti with a V16 engine paired with a 25 kilowatt-hour battery and 3 electric motors on an 800-volt system. With 1,800 horsepower, 37-mile electric range, and 0 to 60 in 1.99 seconds. The suspension is completely 3D printed with a top speed of 276 miles per hour. Only 250 will be built, and deliveries start in 2026. And this is what the interior looks like, just out of a science fiction kind of movie. For $4.6 million, I think you would expect something like that. Apparently, Lucid rushed to grab the failed Fisker Ocean trademark. And they're actually trying to trademark the Ocean part. Elon Musk responds to his own post that I mentioned earlier about Tesla trying to win the AI race and Tesla aiming for 50% Tesla AI hardware and 50% NVIDIA and others. Elon Musk says mostly hardware 4 and some Dojo. Then hardware 5, which has been named to AI 5 in the second half of next year. The Tesla AI 5 computer has 10x the capability of hardware 4 computer, and Tesla makes the whole software stack. Martin Visha on X suggests that Tesla may soon start to advertise both digitally, which they have been doing, and on the TV. He also says that spending 1% of revenue on these ads he thinks would be margin accretive and mission accretive. Gary Black says, as a Tesla shareholder, please convince your ex-boss. And I do agree. Advertising more can be effective, especially for television ads for a place like Michigan where I live, and not a lot of people know about Tesla. You could walk down the street and ask people to, name a Tesla product, and I would say probably 95% of people wouldn't even be able to tell you any Tesla product. Model Y, Model X, Model S, Model 3, Cybertruck, none of them. They don't know how much they cost. They don't know the specs. They don't know how cheap they are now, presumably. Most people still think Teslas are super expensive. And not to mention, a lot of people have range anxiety. So I think advertising in the right demographics on the television would actually be a really good way to spend advertising dollars. Marina Del Rey held the largest Cybertruck sales event to date, and about 30 Cybertrucks were delivered to customers at the same time. Here on the day today, we did have S&P Global Composite PMI that came in at 54.6. We were expecting 53.4, so that was a little bit better than expected. S&P Global Manufacturing PMI came in at 51.7. You were expecting 51.5. And S&P Global Services PMI came in at 55.1. We were expecting 54. So stronger across the board, but the CB leading index month over month came in much weaker than we were expecting at negative 0.5%. The estimate was negative 0.2%. This is causing 10-year treasury yields to rise almost 2 basis points back up to about 4.27%. But you are still well off of your recent highs at about 4.7%. Dan Ives wrote on X, we would expect once Tesla officially gets through the final steps in the Twilight Zone Delaware legal spiderweb that the board will have a new incentive-driven AI comp package for Musk that gets him to 25% plus ownership while keeping all AI initiatives under the hood of Tesla. Gary Black writes on X, Tesla's Q2 deliveries to miss Wall Street consensus, says Barclays. And it says here, Barclays expects Tesla to report Q2 deliveries of 415,000 units, down 11% year over year, and below the consensus estimate of 444,000. However, the firm believes its estimate is somewhat in line with a more muted buy-side expectations and suspects the final Tesla compiled consensus estimates will end up lower. A soft delivery result could turn investor attention back to the currently challenging fundamental environment for Tesla, as the company is likely to face continued negative revisions on 2024 and 2025 estimates, the analyst tells investors in a research note. Now, I don't know if big money investors like Barclays or others are taking a look at the Google Trends data lately, because they would see Google Trends are at the highest levels they have been in the last 5 years. This is, I would argue, by far the best way we can judge what demands may look demand or deliveries may look like in the US. And this is just outright impressive. This is the past 12 months, and clearly there's an upward trajectory for Google Trends, and there has been for basically the entirety of Q2. But if you look at the last 5 years, it's really standout how strong the Google Trends data has been in Q2. You really haven't seen anything like this in a very long time, especially with the interest rate buy down on the Model Y. That seemed to have caused a lot of demand. And I think that is to some degree being underappreciated for US based deliveries. Now, that's not going to have an effect on Canadian deliveries, on European deliveries. All rates are going to be set different. This was only for the US, but the US is number 1 or number 2 most important market for Tesla. Historically, it's the most important market for Tesla. The last 2 quarters or so, China has seen more deliveries than the US, but I think the US could be a standout strong part of this quarter's delivery number. And if that's true, Tesla is going to beat the estimates. And as Barclays said, once the IR investor compiled estimates come out, not just analyst consensus estimates, you're going to see the number fall quite a bit. And I think Tesla's going to easily be able to beat the estimated number, in which we don't have the IR estimated number just yet. Google Trends data, though, nonetheless is ticking up yet again for the Model Y, going from 28 to 29, the Model 3 going from 25 to 26, the Cybertruck falling a little bit from 75 to 68, the Model S and the Model X, both at 11 and 9 respectively, have not moved at all, but solid overall Google Trends data. Option activity today in Tesla is very positive. You can see 10 orders from institutional investors totaling $2.36 million with a positive order value of 100%. If you take a look at today's expiration, you do have volume on the call side of 60.2% calls and volume on the put side of 39.8% puts. If we take a look at next week's expiration, open interest is almost 74% calls and about 26% puts. Volume today is 60.1% calls, and volume is on the put side of about 40%. You can see the put to call ratio of open interest is 0.35%. That means there's almost 3 times as many calls for next week's expiration than there are puts. And that's a pretty good sign of continued expected upside. Google Trends data for full self-driving is staying roughly about the same at 23, showing continued interest into full self-driving. The percent of stocks today above their 50-day moving average is actually declining. You have about 0.25% of all stocks out there, 0.25% of stocks out there that are breaking under their 50-day moving average today. So the average stock is continuing on this downward descent and this downward trajectory. You do have 38.43% of all stocks above their 50-day moving average, which is a pretty bad number, even comparing to mid-May when you had about 62% of stocks above their 50-day moving average. That's dropped almost 50% in about a month. CNN's Fear and Greed Index is falling further into fear territory at 42 today, which again is something you don't see all too often when the S&P and the NASDAQ are sitting at pretty much all-time highs. I can't recall any other period of time there has been such a divergence between these signals in the markets, signaling fear on the CNN Fear and Greed Index. At the same time, you're this overextended on the S&P and the NASDAQ at all-time highs. Never seen that before, probably won't see that again for a long time. And yes, I do think right now you still want to be very defensive. Nonetheless, Tesla continues their advertising campaign on Google, currently running about 4,000 different ads. Global inventory numbers ticking downwards for all your Tesla products. The Model Y at about 5,700, which is a far cry from the almost 10,000 number we had in the beginning of April, suggesting again the Model Y has sold through at least some inventory. The Model X falling from its recent highs of about 5,200 in inventory down to about 3,900, so that's good. The Model S as well recently hit a similar level of inventories as the Model X at about 4,700, now at about 3,200. The Model 3, you've also seen a rise there, but it's falling back to about 2,800. inventories generally falling tends to be a good sign for demand. Last but not least, the Atlanta Fed GDP Now tracker is expecting about 3% GDP for Q2. And if we take a look at Tesla stock on a technical basis, you want to again get above that trend line about 183.50 or so. If we get above that today, great. There's still some time left in the trading day. You're not too far off of that. Tesla stock's currently at $182.37 per share. Again, I'm not that confident of what we have ahead for markets. I think there's going to be some trouble coming, some problems coming, but we will obviously have to wait and see. If we do get that downside, if markets start to take a turn for the worst, you want to watch that 100-day moving average and that 20-day moving average because they are converged on each other at about $178 per share. If you hold support there, that'll be great. You really want to get above 188. And as long as the markets do not go through this kind of correctionary period that I am expecting soon, then I think you'll inevitably break above 188. Also worth mentioning, today is the largest option expiration in the history of the markets, with over $5.1 trillion of value expiring today. And what this typically does on these large option expirations, these triple witchings or quad witchings where you have just a lot of expiration taking place, is you actually don't get a lot of volatility the week of that expiration because these positions are embedded, market makers are hedged out for them. You've already seen kind of the effects from that option positioning, and a lot of it has been calls. So what you've seen is the markets have went higher, clearly. You actually tend to get most of the volatility the next following week when that money gets assigned, gets sold out, gets repositioned back into our markets. And what we are seeing right now is a lot of puts, a lot of defensive kind of positioning for next week's expiration, as well as when you start to look out a couple of months also. So some of this money could redeploy into some puts, into some defensive positions, and help cause that downside. So that's also something to be watching for, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next video. As far as Tesla's RSI, sitting at 54.52, pretty neutral overall, and the MACD line is at 2.05, which is a really good number. Signal line at 1.45, so that looks pretty good here in the short term as well. Let me know what you think about all of this information down below in the comment section. Hit the like button as well as subscribe to the channel. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.